Langston Hughes, I too sing America. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Perhaps Black Americans are no longer required to go back to the kitchen when company comes, but all too frequently, even today, even in Germantown, Black Americans are working in the kitchen while their white brothers and sisters earn more and greater comfort in the jobs up front or in air-conditioned offices. My Black Girls High classmate, Sandra Pollard, tried out for a role in George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. Her audition was rated excellent. However, explained the teacher in charge, this play has only parts for white actors. Sandra was hurt and stunned into silent disappointment, but was able to share the story with me 40 years later. My Black math teacher colleague, Sandy McLean, the epitome of elegance and style, purchased a new home with her husband and toddler son on a quiet street just off of Ivy Hill Road. White neighbors on either side greeted her warmly, yet within a few weeks, both had posted for sale signs on their lawns. Despite the hurt, Sandy told me the story some years later with a hint of rueful humor in her eyes. It was easy for me to assume growing up in Germantown in a radical-leaning progressive household and bolstered by teachings on social justice in my Sunday school classes here at the Unitarian Church, that I had perfect understanding of the lives of my Black junior high and high school contemporaries. Years later, reading the memoirs of B.B. Moore Campbell and Elaine Brown, I came to understand that in many ways, though geographically and educationally proximate, these young women lived lives in a world distinct from and significantly less privileged than my own. Langston Hughes' poetry, my classmates and colleagues' shared stories, the writings of contemporary Black authors all provided me with windows of understanding. Black and Asian and Latino and white students in Philadelphia public schools today are denied opportunities for these paths to understanding. Segregated housing patterns, resegregated schools, and the virtual elimination of all school libraries reduce the likelihood of shared stories through personal interaction and literary expression. Prison libraries, by contrast, are required by state law, and in the case of nearby Graterford Prison, enjoy the presence of professional staff with advanced degrees. Black lives matter, have always mattered, whether acknowledged or not. Black minds matter too. Let us determine together to remedy the inequities that belie this essential truth.
This piece is called Your Life Matters, and it's written by Kenny Wiley, who is a UU World Senior Editor and Director of Faith Formation at Prairie Unitarian Universalist Church in Parker, Colorado. Most of us Unitarian Universalists are here because we felt welcome here at last. Some of us were too agnostic somewhere else. Some of us weren't vindictive enough somewhere else. We were too working class somewhere else. We were too lesbian somewhere else. We were too nerdy somewhere else. Too introverted somewhere else. Too gay married somewhere else. Many of us are here because this faith and the people in it affirmed, you may not be perfect, but your life matters just the same. That's what's on the line now. Through racism and posthumous victim blaming, through silence and bullets and indifference and vilification, Black people are being told that our lives do not matter, or that they matter only conditionally. Black lives matter if if we are educated, if we are respectful, if. And sometimes not even then do our lives matter. Right now, we as Unitarian Universalists are being called to act. We are being called by our ancestors, those who demanded that we help end slavery, that we fight for suffrage, that we join the struggle to end Jim Crow, that we listen to and honor Black power. Lydia Maria Child and William Lloyd Garrison are calling us. Lucy Stone is calling us. Fannie B. Williams and Frances Ellen Harper are calling us. James Reeb is calling us. Viola Liuso is calling us. Guided by that enduring, unfulfilled promise of the belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, ours is a faith that has said, or worked to say, to those who have been marginalized, you are a woman and your life matters. You are gay or lesbian and your life matters. You are transgender and your life matters. You are bisexual and your life matters. You have a disability and your life matters. You were not loved as a child and your life matters. You struggle with depression and your life matters. Right now we are being called by our ancestors, by our principals, by young Black activists across the country to promote and affirm. You are young and Black and your life matters. You stole something and your life matters. I have been taught to fear you and your life matters. The police are releasing your criminal record and your life matters. They are calling you a thug and your life matters. Our ancestors, principals, and fellow humans are calling on us to promote and affirm, with deeds and words, Black Lives Matter.
Our next reading is by Reverend Daniel Schatz. He's the minister at Bucksmont Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Warrington, Pennsylvania. He writes, as a Unitarian Universalist minister, it is sometimes my role to answer correspondence that comes to our congregation from members in the community. Last night, I received this brief note in my inbox. Good evening. I'm very upset at the signage that is outside your church stating that Black Lives Matter. Since when has God chosen to see us by the color of our skin? The sign should be taken down and replaced with All Lives Matter. How will this nation of ours ever join together if we are constantly looking at everyone by their race? Unless you were actually there in Ferguson or in New York or Cleveland, you do not have all the facts. A Bucks County resident. It's a sentiment I've heard before, Daniel writes, and I gave a great deal of thought before sending the following response. Dear friend, thank you for writing with your concern. Of course all lives matter. Central to Unitarian Universalism is the affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Sadly, our society has a long history of treating some people as less valuable than others. Study after study has confirmed that in equivalent situations, African Americans and Latinos are treated with deadly force far more often than white people, and authorities held less accountable. Unfortunately, racial bias continues to exist even when it is no longer conscious. This, too, is confirmed by many studies. A lack of accountability and the use of force, combined with unconscious bias, is too often a deadly combination, and one that could place police officers as well as the public in great danger. To say that Black Lives Matter is not to say that other lives do not matter. Indeed, it is quite the reverse. It is to recognize that all lives do matter and to acknowledge that African Americans are often targeted unfairly. Witness the number of African Americans accosted daily for no reason other than walking through a white neighborhood, including some, like young Trayvon Martin, who lost their lives. And that our society is not yet so advanced to have become truly colorblind. This means that many people of goodwill face the hard task of recognizing that these societal ills continue to exist, and that white privilege continues to exist, even though we wish it didn't and would not have asked for it. I certainly agree, Daniel writes, that no loving God would judge anyone by skin color. As a white man, he continues, I have never been followed by security in a department store or even been stopped by police for driving through a neighborhood in which I didn't live. My African American friends have, almost to a person, had these experiences. Some have been through incidences that were far worse. I owe it to the ideal that we share, the ideal that all lives matter, to take their experiences seriously and listen to what they are saying. To deny the truth of these experiences because they make me uncomfortable would be to place my comfort above the safety of others, and I cannot do that. I very much appreciate you writing to me, Daniel writes, and I'm glad that we share the goal of coming to a day when people will not be judged consciously or unconsciously on the basis of their race. I believe that day is possible too, but that it will take a great deal of work to get there. That work begins by listening to one another, and listening especially to the voices of those who have the least power in society. If nothing else is clear from the past few weeks, it is painfully evident that a great many people do not believe that they are treated fairly. Healing begins by listening to those voices and stories. Thank you again for writing me.
A letter written by Albert Einstein in 1946, entitled The Negro Question. I am writing as one who has lived among you in America only a little more than 10 years, and I am writing seriously and warningly. Many readers may ask, what right has he to speak about things which concern us alone, and which to no newcomer should touch? I do not think such a standpoint is justified. One who's grown up in an environment takes much for granted. On the other hand, one who has come to a country as a mature person may have a keen eye for everything peculiar and characteristic. I believe he should speak out freely on what he sees and feels, and by doing so, he may perhaps prove himself useful. What soon makes the new arrival devoted to this country is a democratic trait among the people. I am not thinking here so much of the democratic political constitution of this country, however highly it may be praised. I am thinking of the relationship between individual people and the attitude that they maintain towards one another. In the United States, everyone feels assured of his worth as an individual. No one humbles himself before another person or class. Even the great differences in wealth and the superior power of a few cannot undermine this healthy self-confidence and natural respect of dignity of one's fellow man. There is, however, a somber point in the social outlook of Americans. Their sense of equality and human dignity is mainly limited to men of white skin. Even among these, there are prejudices of which I, as a Jew, am clearly conscious, but they are unimportant in comparison with the attitude of the whites towards their fellow citizens of darker complexion, particularly towards Negroes. The more I feel an American, the more this situation pains me. I can escape the feeling of complacency in it only by speaking out. Many a sincere person will answer, our attitude towards Negroes is the result of unfavorable experiences which we have had by living side by side with Negroes in this country. They are not our equal in intelligence, sense of responsibility, or reliability. I am firmly convinced that whoever believes this suffers from a fatal misconception. Your ancestor dragged these black people from their homes by force, and in the white man's quest for wealth and an easy life, they have been ruthlessly suppressed and exploited, degraded into slavery. The modern prejudice against Negroes is the result of the desire to maintain this unworthy condition. The ancient Greeks also had slaves. They were not Negroes, but white men who had been taken captive in war. There could be no talk of racial differences. And yet, Aristotle, one of the great Greek philosophers, declared slaves inferior beings who were justly subdued and deprived of their liberty. It is clear that he was enmeshed in a traditional prejudice from which, despite his extraordinary intelligence, he could not free himself. A large part of our attitude towards things is conditioned by opinions and emotions which we are unconsciously absorbed as children from our environment. In other words, it is tradition, besides inherited attitudes and qualities which make us what we are. We but rarely reflect how relatively small, as compared with the powerful influence of tradition is the influence of our conscious thought upon our conduct and convictions. I would be foolish to despise tradition, but with our growing self-conscious and increasing intelligence, we must begin to control our tradition and assume a critical attitude towards it if human relations are ever to change for the better. We must try to recognize what in our accepted tradition is damaging to our fate and dignity and shape our lives accordingly. I believe that whoever tries to think things through honestly will soon recognize how unworthy and even fatal is the traditional bias against Negroes. What, however, can the man of goodwill do to combat this deeply rooted prejudice? He must have the courage to set an example by word and deed, and must watch lest his children become influenced by this racial prejudice. I do not believe there is a way in which this deeply entrenched evil can be quickly healed. But until this goal is reached, there is no greater satisfaction for a just and well-meaning person than the knowledge that he has devoted his best energies to the service of this good cause.
Good morning. This is taken from the Standing Up on the Side of Love site. I just embellished it a little bit. What do we mean when we say we are standing on the side of love? Unitarian Universalists affirm unconditional, universal love as a foundation and grounding for our actions in the world. We strive to be of service to our communities and advocate for change, speak truth to power on local, state, national, and international levels. Through our Standing on the Side of Love campaign, we amplify the voices of the oppressed through online media. We show up in partnership at justice events across the country. We lobby national leaders on immigration reform, racial justice, equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, religious freedom, and more. And above all, we work to make love real in the world. We affirm and support the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our first principle. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, our second principle. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, our sixth principle. So we stand on the side of love, believing, affirming, and supporting that Black lives matter because all lives matter.